In this position, if it's black to move, it is a draw, and if it's white to move, it is a win for white. So let's see how, if this was black to move, how would black play. So black would first give a check, king would go here, knight would give this check. Now if the pawn takes, we take the pawn, and it's a draw because of insufficient material. And so if king goes here, if pawn doesn't take, then king goes there, and then we give we can go here, and the pawn is lost, and then you can't even save it. But like this, you just take the bishop. So, or you don't take the bishop actually. If you take the bishop, then king goes here, and this is a loss for black. So after this you just take the pawn, that's all. You won't really think too much. And yeah, so this one is a draw, and that is why if white plays, this is a win after king c7 or bishop c6, and I'll show you why. So first let's look at king c7, how this is the draw. So now let's go with this move, knight d5, knight d8, and now bishop goes here, and this is a zugzwang. Any move black plays is a losing move. So your king can't move anywhere, king can't leave the knight, so knight has to move, and knight can't really go anywhere. The bishop just takes the knight, and so this is why this is a lost position for black. And why did I play knight d8? Because there's no other move for the knight after king c7. Now let's look at bishop c6. Now this is a draw because after knight gives a check on d6, king goes here, and now you can't do this check because the bishop is supporting the pawn, and after the pawn takes the knight, it will be supported by the bishop. So that's a loss for black as well, and so that's why avoiding the playing this or supporting the pawn is the way to win this position. And this position is a win for white, no matter which player moves first. So let's say black moves first, and so here black doesn't have any move, because if you move the king, there's no place for the king. So if you go here, the knight is lost, and so if knight has to move, so all the squares that the knight can go to are controlled by the bishop, and so this is a lost position, no matter which player moves first. And now let's look at this position. Now this position is a draw because the king has stalemate chances, and let's see, no matter which player moves first, this position is a draw. So let's say if white moves first, king goes here, then you have this move, and because this if the king takes, it's a stalemate. Let's see why. So bishop controls this square and king controls these two squares, and so that's why the king can't take. And if you go here, we should protect the knight, and let's say you don't go there, instead you just move your bishop here, then you go back again, and if you play another waiting move, now you can just play this, and if here, then you go back with your knight, and if bishop stays, then we can play this move again, because it's a stalemate. So this is why this is a draw, no matter which player plays first. And now let's look at this position. is this. Wait a minute. So this is a win for white, no matter which piece moves first. So let's say black moves first. So black would play this move. Then bishop would attack. Black goes back. Now king goes here. And now black doesn't have any move to escape. And the knight doesn't have any move. And this is Zugzwang. No matter what black plays, white would easily win this. So now let's see what if white moves first. So this was the position. So now if white moves first, white can play this move. Knight goes here or here, let's say. King goes here, knight goes here, and bishop comes here. And it's the same situation where black has to move and black doesn't have any move. And this is a win for white. So this is a position in which the controlling knight is very unstable. And controlling knight meaning the knight is controlling the square in front of the pawn. And so if in this position if the king takes, then we take the pawn, and this is the draw. And so we can't just take the knight. So first give a check. If king goes to c5 is the right move. If king goes to e5, then this is a zugzwang, because if knight goes anywhere we just push the pawn. So let's say if knight goes here and we push, knight goes here, we just promote to a queen. And so yeah, this is a zugzwang. Now after this check, king should go to c5, and now bishop a2 is the right move. If you play king e6, then the knight gets to relocate. Knight goes to h7, and now you can't push the pawn because this is a fork and you lose the pawn. So king goes to e7, and now knight goes to f8 anyways, because if you take the knight we can take the pawn. And so bishop goes to c2, king goes to c6, and now there are two ways to draw the game. So first, two ways that white will choose, and both of them will be draw. So let's go with bishop b1 first. Now king goes to d5, bishop goes to d3, and now king has to before here, so king had to go to d5, because if this was played then this is a zugzwang after bishop e4. Now king can't go back to c6, and the pawn and the king has to move. If the knight moves, then the knight is lost, because all the knight square are covered by the bishop and the king. And so if the king moves, then we take the knight. And so that's why king d5 is important after bishop b1. And after this, bishop d3 and king c6, and this is the draw. And now let's look at the other move after bishop c2. Now let's look at this position. Again, the second position, which is bishop a4, king c5, bishop goes e8, king goes d5, bishop f7 check. And now after bishop c6, bishop goes to h5, and now king c5 is the right move. If king goes to d5, then bishop goes to f3, king e5, and this is, in this position black can't do any move because knight doesn't have any squares, and the king can't keep the control over the pawn, because those squares are covered by the king, and these two squares are covered by the bishop, these two squares, and the king has to move in the next move. And so if king takes, we take the knight with the king, and the pawn promotes because the king is too far away. And so that's why after bishop h5, king c5 is the move. And here if bishop tries to play the same move again, knight gives a check, king goes to here, for example, knight gives another check, king goes here, knight gives check. And now if king tries to play any other move, like king here, this is a fork, and so king has to give away the pawn, or this I keep repeating checks. And so let's see if any other move is played. So for example, bishop here, king goes here, and now this is also a draw because white doesn't have any move. Let's say bishop here, then again a check because the bishop is not controlling, and yeah, same situation. So king won't give away the control of the pawn, and if he can't really go here, so yeah, that's all for this position. And now let's look at after bishop a2. So king was here, pawn was here, knight was here, knight was on there, and now bishop goes to a2. Now let's see. So after bishop a2, now king e6, king c6 is the right move, but if knight goes to g4, now bishop goes to b1, and if knight repeats, then bishop goes to e4, and knight can't take because pawn promotes, and pawn pushes and then promotes without any restriction. So, and knight can't, let's say knight gives a check, we go king d7, knight gives another check, now we go here. So we kind of make it the knight's turn instead of directly going here, because then the knight would have another option of just going back here, and then it would be our turn. So instead we go to d7 first, and then after knight checks we go e6, and now it's a zugzwang and knight can't move anywhere. For example, if it goes here, we just push, and if it takes, we push, and so there is no other knight move, because after the knight moves, the pawn will just push, and the king also doesn't have any move, because any king move would just be like, for example, giving not being in contact with the pawn, and then we just take the knight. And yeah, so after king e6, king goes to king c6, king goes to e6, and now knight at 7 is the right move. But if and now instead of knight at 7, if king c5 is played, we can directly go to bishop d5, and after knight takes, we can just push the pawn, and so king doesn't have any move, so we will have to lose the control of the pawn, and then we take the knight. Or we can also go bishop to b1, and after bishop to b1 there is no move for the king. If king goes here, we just play this move, and knight can't take because we promote, and so king has to leave this, so he goes back, and again we just play a waiting move, I guess, or just any other bishop move also is fine. And so king has to move again, and this is losing for black. Now after knight at 7, bishop to d5 check, and now king c5, king c7, because if you take, we just push. Now knight goes to f6 instead of taking the bishop, and now we go bishop to f3, and after knight is 7, we go knight g7, g8, check, we go king e6, and after knight goes back here, we play e4, bishop e4, and now knight doesn't have any move because no check, and same position as earlier. This is also zugzwang for black, and that's all for the bishop with one pawn and versus the knight. And yeah, thanks for watching.